Hi, my name's Mike Kelley. I am the director here at the Iowa and Sac and Fox Mission Museum, here on the outskirts of Highland, Kansas. And today I'd want to be talking to you guys about kind of a little bit of history of the museum, kind of what we have going on now, and hopefully what we have planned for the future. So here we are on the second floor of the museum, and a little bit about the history of this building was that it was built in 1845 using a combination of tribal money and money from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and some donations from the Presbyterian Mission Society. And originally, the lumber itself for this building was shipped over from Pennsylvania, and the limestone foundation was mined in a nearby quarry, and the bricks for the rest of the building were baked on site. And it operated as a Presbyterian mission school run by the Reverends Irvin and Hamilton up until from about 1845 to about 1854. With 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act moved the tribal boundaries from where this mission was originally in the heart of. But when the boundaries move, the tribes get pushed further up north, and they are no longer in kind of walking distance of using this building. So then it became kind of an orphanage, and it operated as an orphanage until the mid to late 1860s, when it was essentially closed down for lack of students. And then it was sold to a local farmer, and it operated as just sort of a private residence. Only 40% of the building remains today. The other 60%, the bricks and limestone were used for construction of some local buildings. Then for a long time it operates as this farm, then becomes a barn. And in about 1937, which would be the 100th anniversary of the tribes moving into what becomes Doniphan County, the local community got together and wanted to purchase the building and fix it back up again to make it a museum to the local history. In 1944, they opened up the first version of the Iowa and Sac and Fox Mission Museum, which had kind of a lot about the Iowa and Sac and Fox tribes locally, but also more about kind of the Highland and Doniphan County. And it operated as such until about 1994. 1994, the state of Kansas State Historical Society closed it down for renovation. They added on elevators, bathrooms, and opened it back up in 1996 as the Native American Heritage Museum. And that focus was a little bit less on local history, and it was more kind of generally about immigrant Indians into Kansas. And it operated as that version of the museum until 2008, when it was closed due to budget cuts. And so it sat empty and unused until about 2021, when the Ioway Tribe was able to get the mission back from the state of Kansas. And we opened it back up to the public again late last year. It was almost a year ago that we were able to actually open it up. And if you can imagine a building that sat empty for so many years, it needed a lot of work then, it still needs a lot of work. Today we're in the process of actually still kind of filling the museum with items. One of the issues that we have is that, like a lot of tribes, over the intervening years, almost all of our artifacts are belonging to other institutions or in private hands. And so what we have here on the second floor today, the Ioway Here to Stay exhibit, these are all items that are held by tribal members or made by tribal artists, and it was their way of trying to help fill the museum and tell our story. One of the things too is that when you operate a building that has been built in 1845, is that there are a lot of things to fix. But also, kind of as a bigger issue, we really want to use this as a way to tell our story. So in addition to being the director of the museum, I'm also a tribal member. And one of the things I've experienced in the past is that because of the way many of our elder generation were brought up, like my grandmother, they were reluctant to teach the language. They were reluctant to teach the stories. They were, really just wanted people to, their grandchildren to meld into society and kind of forget about the tribal history itself, because they didn't want them to be outsiders like they were treated when they were younger. And one of the struggles we have today is trying to reconstruct the histories because they were either hidden from us or they were lost when we lost our elders. And that is an ongoing struggle for many tribes, not just ours. And this is one of the ways we're trying to address that, as having a single location where people can come and maybe pick up bits and pieces of their history again, and kind of a place to start. So the Ioway Tribe right now, they're located in kind of northeast Kansas, Doniphan County, and kind of into and across into, I think, Richardson County, but mostly up around White Cloud, Kansas, where they've been since about 1854. The tribal boundaries, the reservation itself is roughly 30 square miles. And they operate White Cloud Casino, and they have a gas station and some other industries. They have a bee farm where you can get local honey and local beeswax products. And so they're really looking into things like regenerative agriculture as well, trying to diversify and trying to fill in many kind of missing niches in the local economy. But considering where we were at, in the 1840s, when there's maybe 300 to 400 tribal members left, I think we're doing pretty good. At least a lot better. Lord, today I want to talk a little bit about one of the exhibits we have. This one is on loan from our friends at the St. Joseph Museum, and it is a bunch of early Western sketches from Rudolf Frederiech Kurz. Kurz comes over from Switzerland in the late 1840s, and he starts sketching what is the early city of St. Joseph and many of the tribal members and their interactions with the city itself. And if you're interested in kind of Western art, if you're interested in the early pioneer trails or the Oregon-California Trail, that this is kind of an interesting look at the melting pot that was St. Joseph as a jumping off point for many of the travelers. So one of the sketches that I find really interesting is the one of Kurz and his wife, Witahe. She was an Iowa tribal member, and he ended up actually married to her through an arranged marriage with her father, who was an important tribal member. It was kind of a tragic love story in that he was really in love with his wife, but she ended up kind of running away after a couple of months because she didn't kind of like being away from home. And if you read Kurz's diary, he really never gets over it, that he spends almost the rest of his life kind of pining away for this beautiful tribal bride that he had very briefly. And you can see a lot of it too reflected in the attention he pays to many of the women in his drawings, is that there's this sort of obsession with the female Indian body that is quite interesting, and get a little bit of a psychological glimpse into the character of the guy. Okay, so here is just a collection of Kurz's sketches and drawings of a lot of Iowa tribal members. And just another example is kind of the uniqueness of this, is that a lot of times if we see pictures or drawings of tribal members, they're usually the very formal portrait affairs. But something like this is just kind of a gentleman talking to if it's his wife or his girlfriend, but the sort of very intimate discussion of two people, very relaxed. And it's not one you see very often, because you just see a lot of these photos are just essentially people just hanging out and living their lives, not realizing that these little snapshots of history are being taken. This is an amazing collection, and that anybody who has interest in the Western time period or the kind of Western expansion should really check this out. We have it for 1 year on loan from the St. Joseph Museum, and so it'll go back to them in March of 2024. But we have a lot more exhibits in the planning, and hopefully we can find new ways to continue to tell the history and the story of the history of the area. Well, thanks for coming by, and we really think this building is a phenomenal spot to visit, and it really represents a unique time and place in not just Kansas history, but U.S. history. And we'd really love anybody who is interested to come by and learn more about the full story. So discover your trail and discover yourself at the Iowa and Sac and Fox Mission Museum.